On Thanksgiving, my son's wife called me a loser, then she saw my mansion and went silent. I was standing in my son's cramped kitchen, holding a bottle of wine I'd driven 2 hours to bring, when I heard my daughter-in-law say the word that would define the rest of that Thanksgiving. Loser. She didn't say it to my face. She said it to her sister in the hallway, in the particular hushed voice people use when they think the walls are thicker than they actually are. I don't know why Ryan even invites him. The man drives a 12-year-old truck and wears the same flannel to every holiday. It's embarrassing, honestly. My friends ask about my father-in-law and I just change the subject. I stood very still in that kitchen, wine bottle sweating in my hand, and for a moment I was 58 years old and also 19 again, back when people underestimated me for the first time, and I let it burn instead of build. My name is Daniel Ashworth, and I want to tell you exactly how that day went, because it didn't end the way Melissa expected, and it didn't end the way I expected either. Let me back up. Ryan is my only son. His mother, Carol, passed 6 years ago from ovarian cancer, and in the years since, Ryan and I have had what I'd call a functional but distant relationship. He calls on my birthday. I show up to Thanksgiving. We talk about football because it's easier than talking about anything real. He married Melissa 3 years ago, a bright, ambitious woman who works in marketing for a mid-sized firm downtown, drives a leased BMW she can't really afford, and has never once asked me a single question about my life that wasn't a variation of, "So are you still doing that handyman thing?" The handyman thing. That's what she calls it when she calls it anything at all. What I actually do, what I've done for the last 22 years, is run a company called Ashworth Structural Group. We started as a 3-man crew doing foundation repair in Ohio. Today we're the largest structural engineering and remediation firm in a 4-state region, with contracts on commercial high-rises, hospital retrofits, and a bridge rehabilitation project that made the front page of the Regional Business Journal last spring. We employ 412 people. Last year we cleared $61 million in revenue. I don't say any of this to brag. I say it because it matters to what happened next. I never told Ryan the real numbers. After Carol died, I pulled back from a lot of things, including talking about the business with my own family. Grief does strange things to a man. I threw myself into work, and somewhere in there I just stopped correcting the story. Ryan grew up watching me come home in work boots covered in concrete dust, and somewhere along the way he decided that's all I'd ever be. I let him believe it, partly because it was easier. Partly, if I'm honest, because I wanted to see who would love me if they thought I had nothing. Turns out, my own son's wife wasn't one of those people. Thanksgiving morning, I put on the flannel Melissa mentioned. It's my favorite, soft from a decade of washing. A shirt Carol bought me the last Christmas before she got sick, and I drove my truck, a 2014 Ford F-250 with 190,000 miles on it that runs like a dream because I maintain it myself, out to Ryan and Melissa's townhouse in the suburbs. I brought a bottle of Camus I'd picked up, a pumpkin pie from the bakery Carol used to love, and a card for Ryan with cash in it, the way I always do. Old habits. The house smelled like turkey and cinnamon when Melissa opened the door. She gave me the kind of hug people give when they're really just leaning in to check if you smell like cigarettes or motor oil. "Daniel, you made it. Ryan, your dad's here." "Hey Dad." Ryan appeared from the kitchen in an apron, flushed from the oven heat, and gave me a real hug, the kind that still means something between us even when everything else is strained. "Glad you came. Traffic bad?" "Wasn't too bad," I said. "Brought wine." "Oh great," Melissa said, glancing at the bottle like she was appraising a garage sale find. "We actually have a really nice bottle already, but I'm sure this'll be fine for before dinner." She set it on the counter, off to the side, next to a bottle of something French with a hand-lettered label that probably cost what I'd pay for a case of the stuff I actually enjoy drinking. I let it go. I always let it go. Melissa's sister Ashley was there with her husband, along with Melissa's parents, Gary and Diane, who I'd met exactly twice before and who both had the specific, assessing look of people who'd been told things about me and were now confirming them in person. Gary worked in commercial real estate development, he called it, though from what Ryan had told me it was mostly small strip mall leasing, and within about 4 minutes of meeting me at the last holiday gathering, he'd made sure I knew he drove a Tesla. I sat in the living room, made small talk about the Lions game, and tried to be pleasant. That's mostly what I do at these things now. I show up, I'm pleasant, I go home to my house, which none of them had ever visited because it was too far or hard to find, according to reasons that shifted depending on who was making the excuse, and I go back to my life. It was during the lull before dinner, when everyone had scattered to different rooms, and I'd gone looking for the bathroom, that I heard Melissa's voice through the cracked door of the hallway, talking to Ashley. I don't know why Ryan even invites him, she said. The man drives a 12-year-old truck and wears the same flannel to every holiday. It's embarrassing, honestly. My friends ask about my father-in-law and I just change the subject. Like, what am I supposed to say? Oh, he does handyman work, lives alone in some rundown place, probably can't even retire. It's mortifying. Ryan deserves better family optics than this. I keep telling him we should be strategic about who we associate with now that my dad's introducing him to people at the firm. Ashley laughed, not unkindly, more like the laugh of someone agreeing without really thinking about it. He seems sweet, though. Sweet doesn't pay for anything, Melissa said. Honestly, sometimes I think Ryan got the short end with his parents. His mom died broke from medical bills, and his dad's basically a loser who never made anything of himself. It's sad, but it's true. I stood in that hallway with my hand on the doorframe, and something in my chest went very cold and very quiet. Carol didn't die broke. I paid every medical bill myself out of pocket in cash because I didn't want the insurance fight slowing down her care by even a day. I remember writing those checks at 2 a.m. at her hospital bedside, my hand shaking, not from fear of the money, I had it, but from fear of losing her regardless of what I spent. And a loser who never made anything of himself. That one landed somewhere deeper than I expected. I've built something. I've built a company from nothing, from a used pickup truck and a business loan I almost didn't get approved for, into something that puts a roof over 400 families' heads every single year. I've done it quietly, without needing anyone's applause, because that's who I am. But hearing it dismissed like that, by someone at my own son's table, on Thanksgiving, it cut in a way I hadn't expected to still be capable of feeling. I didn't say anything. I went into the bathroom, splashed water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. 58 years old, flannel shirt, calloused hands, and apparently in the eyes of my daughter-in-law, a loser. I thought about leaving. I thought about it seriously, just walking out, getting in my truck, driving home to the house Melissa had never bothered to visit, and letting the silence of my absence say what I didn't have the heart to say out loud. But then I thought about Ryan, about the way he still hugs me like it means something, about Carol and what she would have wanted, and what she would have said if she'd heard those words about herself and about me. Carol would have wanted me to stay, and she would have wanted me to stop hiding. So I made a decision, standing there in that little bathroom with the seashell soap and the guest towels that had never been used for anything but decoration. I decided that this would be the last Thanksgiving anyone in that house mistook me for something I wasn't. Dinner went the way these dinners go. Gary talked about a development deal. Diane asked Melissa about a vacation to Turks and Caicos they were planning for the spring. Ryan carved the turkey the way I taught him when he was 14, methodical and careful, and I watched him do it and felt that particular ache a father feels watching his son do something well that he once showed him how to do. Melissa was polite to me across the table, the specific brand of polite that's really just performance for an audience, smiling when Gary looked over, adjusting her tone when Ryan was in earshot. I answered when spoken to. I ate my turkey. I complimented the stuffing, which actually was very good. And then, over my pie, the one from Carol's bakery, sitting mostly untouched next to the French wine's dessert equivalent, some elaborate tart Melissa had ordered from a patisserie, Gary turned to me with the kind of condescending warmth people use when they're about to be cruel while thinking they're being generous. So Daniel, he said, Ryan tells us you're still doing the contracting thing. Foundation work, is it? Structural work, yeah, I said. Good honest work, Gary said, in a tone that made honest sound like a consolation prize. Never anything wrong with working with your hands. Diane's father was a plumber, you know, salt of the earth. It's a family business, I said. I started it after I got out of the army. Right, Gary nodded, already moving on. Small operation or... And this is the moment. Melissa set down her fork and looked at me with an expression I'd seen on her face a dozen times before, the one that says she already knows the answer and is asking only to watch me confirm it in front of her parents. It's pretty small, she said, answering for me before I could. Just Daniel and a couple guys, right, odd jobs, that kind of thing. She turned to her mother. It's sweet, honestly, very, blue collar. I set my fork down. Actually, I said, it's not that small anymore. The table went a little quiet, the way tables do when someone's tone shifts even slightly from its expected register. Ashworth Structural Group has 412 employees, I said. We do structural engineering and remediation on commercial buildings, hospitals, bridges, and public infrastructure across 4 states. Last year we did just over $61 million in revenue. We're currently the lead contractor on the Route 9 bridge rehabilitation, which I believe was in the paper Gary was reading in the living room earlier. Nobody said anything. I don't talk about the business much, I continued, because after Carol died I didn't much feel like talking about anything, and because it never seemed like anyone was particularly interested in asking. I looked at Melissa. But since you brought up the medical bills, Carol's care was paid in full out of pocket by me. She didn't die broke. She died surrounded by the best doctor's money could get her, in a private room, with no financial stress touching her in her final months, because I made damn sure of that. I'd appreciate you not repeating otherwise. Melissa's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Daniel, I didn't mean. You did mean it, I said, not unkindly, but firmly. I heard you in the hallway, a loser who never made anything of himself. I heard all of it. The silence that followed had a texture to it. Ashley stared at her pie like it had personally betrayed her. Diane's mouth had fallen slightly open. Gary, who had just spent 40 minutes talking about a strip mall lease renewal like it was the Panama Canal, had gone very quiet indeed, doing the math of a man realizing he'd been condescending to someone worth roughly 40 times more than his entire real estate portfolio. Ryan looked at me, stunned, then at Melissa, then back at me. Dad, is that true? It's true, I said. I should have told you a long time ago. That's on me, son, not on you. I let people believe what was easy to believe because I didn't want to be loved for a number. I wanted, my voice caught just slightly, I wanted to know that if I showed up in the truck in the flannel with nothing to my name but a pickup and a pie, I'd still be welcome at this table. Today I found out I'm not by everyone. Melissa's eyes were wet now, and her hands were shaking slightly around her wine glass, the French one. Daniel, I am so sorry. I said something awful and I didn't think you'd hear it, and that doesn't make it okay, I know that, I'm not looking for an apology dinner, I said gently. I'm looking for something different going forward. I'd like an honest relationship with my son's wife, not one built on assumptions about my truck. I want to tell you the rest, because the money isn't really the point of this story, even though the money is what got everyone's attention. 2 weeks after that Thanksgiving, I invited Ryan and Melissa out to the house, the mansion, as it got called later, though I've always just thought of it as a big empty house that's mostly too quiet since Carol passed. It sits on 11 acres about 40 minutes outside the city, 6 bedrooms. A workshop out back where I still like to build furniture with my own 2 hands, because sitting in an office all day makes me feel like a stranger to myself. There's a pond. There's a wraparound porch Carol picked out from a magazine 15 years ago, insisting we'd sit out there together and grow old watching the sunset, which we got 12 years to do before the cancer took that too. Melissa stood in the foyer under the chandelier and didn't say a word for almost a full minute. I watched her take it in, the scale of it, the quiet elegance Carol had insisted on rather than anything gaudy, the family photos on every wall, 22 years of a life built brick by brick that nobody outside these walls had ever seen. I had no idea, she finally said. I know, I said. That was rather the point for a while. I'm not proud of that, if I'm honest. Hiding isn't the same as humility, even if it looks like it from the outside. She turned to me, and for the first time since I'd known her, there was nothing performed in her expression at all. I judged you before I ever really knew you, and I said something cruel about you and about Carol, on the one day of the year that's supposed to be about being grateful for the people at your table. I don't have an excuse for that. I just have an apology, and I understand if it's not enough. It's a start, I said. Apologies aren't supposed to erase things. They're supposed to be a foundation for something better. I know a thing or two about foundations. She almost laughed at that, the first real laugh I'd heard from her in 3 years of knowing her. We sat on the porch that Carol loved so much, the 3 of us, and I told them, really told them, for the first time about the business, about the 3-man crew and the loan I almost didn't get, about the year we nearly lost everything on a job that went sideways in 2009, and the year after that when we won the contract that changed everything. About Carol, who used to do the books at our kitchen table until we could afford real accountants, who believed in the company before there was much to believe in. I told them I wasn't sharing the number to prove anything. I told them I was sharing it because secrets, even well-intentioned ones, have a way of teaching the people around you the wrong lessons, that you can't be trusted with the truth, that appearances matter more than substance, that love has to be earned through what you show rather than who you are. Ryan cried a little, which he doesn't do often. He told me he always felt like there was something he wasn't being let in on, some door I kept half closed, and that he'd spent years assuming it was because I didn't think he could handle it, or didn't think enough of him to share it. That broke something in me, hearing that. I'd been so busy protecting myself from being loved for the wrong reasons that I'd accidentally taught my own son I didn't trust him. We talked until the sun went down over the pond, the way Carol always wanted, And for the first time in 6 years, that porch didn't feel quite so empty. Melissa and I aren't perfect now. We didn't become best friends overnight because of one honest conversation on a porch, but she calls more. She asks real questions about the business, sure, but also about Carol, about my time in the army, about who I actually am underneath the flannel and the truck, and the 22 years of quiet work. Last month she asked me to help pick out a foundation contractor for her parents' new house, and when I offered to just have my own crew do it, she cried a little and said thank you like she meant it. Gary, for his part, has become considerably more interested in my thoughts on infrastructure investment. I try not to hold that against him too hard. People are complicated, and most of them are just doing their best with the information in front of them, even when, as in Melissa's case, that information was wrong, and even when, as in my own case, I was the one who let it stay that way. I still wear the flannel, I still drive the truck. I finally bought a new one last spring, but only because the old one's transmission finally gave out, and even then I felt a small pang of grief handing over the keys. Some things you build a life around, and letting go of them, even small things, takes more out of you than people expect. But I don't hide anymore. Not the business, not the money, not the grief I still carry for Carol 6 years on. If there's one thing that Thanksgiving taught me, it's that the people worth having at your table will love you whether you arrive in a truck or a town car, and the ones who won't, well, at least now I know the difference. This Thanksgiving, Melissa is hosting again. She asked me, very deliberately, very carefully, if I'd bring the pie from Carol's old bakery. I told her I wouldn't miss it for the world.